6:16 in Trinidad and Tobago. Very kind of you to be with us on this Wednesday morning. Well, I suppose all of the challenges that we face, whatever they may be, crime, corruption, violence, so many different issues, probably come all right back to the home and the home situation and indeed issues of parenting. And that's why we've invited clinical psychologist Kelly McFarlane to be our first guest this morning to discuss a number of issues related to parenting, and a couple of issues come immediately to mind. The abandonment of a baby girl at Port of Spain General Hospital on Monday, the sad strangling and killing of 7-year-old Hope. All of that was associated with it was at the San Fernando General Hospital that baby was found, thankfully, on Monday. But Ms. McFarlane, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. And of course, you were one of our regular contributors in our Family Focus series a couple of years ago. And I suppose we could spend the rest of the morning talking about issues of parenting. But in the few minutes that we have, what perspective can you offer us this morning? Good morning to you.
Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here to join in such an important discussion. Parenting, I think one of the things we have to accept early on when we decide to be parents, or for some of us who don't decide to but become parents, is that parenting is not an easy breezy job, especially if we take it seriously. You're bringing a being into the world, and what you want is to help them to become the best version of themselves, to be well adjusted, emotionally regulated, good interpersonally, healthy psychologically, healthy physically, and that takes lots of effort. Right? When we have kids, we have to know that everything that we do, they model. And so we have to be well adjusted ourselves a lot of times. And of course, for a lot of us, that's difficult a lot. But in order for them to be well adjusted, we also have to.
But Ms. McFarlane, let's then deal with what is rather than what we would like, because I understand the point that you're making, that we would all like to think that when parents become parents, that, they have the support, they are emotionally ready, but clearly that is not the case in many cases in Trinidad and Tobago. So maybe we should be talking about what are the support services, what is there to assist vulnerable people who become parents, who, sadly in the case in Palo Seco, the mother would have had mental issues and clearly some challenges. In the case of the abandonment of the baby on Monday, where someone probably not in a situation financially, emotionally, or whatever, to take care of a child. What is there in our environment in Trinidad and Tobago, either formally or informally, to support people in situations like that?
Well, the thing is, we do have mental health care services that are free in the public sector. We have the clinics, throughout the different districts. We have the St. Anne's Hospital and so on. And then, of course, we have private sector mental health facilities. However, because of, sometimes stigma or sometimes lack of understanding, lack of knowledge about mental health and the lack thereof, oftentimes people don't know that these things exist or that that's where they should go. And we even have things like Lifeline and different call centers. We have the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists has a directory listing of people that could help. So you have free and paid services. But again, I think it's getting the information out there. And I know that I've been seeing things circulating about emergency numbers and so on. But the question, I think, is why do people not access it, right? And I think it comes down to lack of knowledge that they exist, how people feel about it, how much people could accept, hey, I am actually going through something, psychologically here, and I do need help. And the things that we see on a daily basis that either encourage or discourage. And apart from mental health services, a lot of people do reach out to people in their community, family members, friends, their religious leaders, and so on. And I think what is very important is that even if people, a person who's going through something doesn't have the insight or isn't thinking, hey, I need to go get help, religious leaders, work colleagues, employers, and so on, we need to be equipped. Others need to be equipped to be able to help people in crisis.
And I think that is really where we need to focus a lot more, because I understand the point, because I'm sure we all would have a general idea of what we would like to see as far as good parenting. But given the issues that would have prompted our discussion this morning, the abandonment of a baby, a child being strangled apparently by her own mother. When we talk about services and opportunities, how do you get people who may not be even inclined, as you said correctly, they may think, well, if I were to make this call, people could think I'm mad, or if I have mental problems and so on, or the stigma attached to it, or if someone is in a desperate financial situation and they've just given birth to a baby, they have no idea where the money is going to come from to take care of this child, so they just leave it somewhere, hoping that someone could take on that responsibility. How do you reach out to individuals like that? How do you let them get that message that, look, there is support here, there is support there? How do you even get them to think in terms of reaching out for that support rather than taking drastic action?
I'll tell you something. If we just go back quite a lot, I tend to feel like there should be more emphasis on mental health care and mental and psychological well-being and strategies and assessment and so on since primary school, right? I feel like, you have the sex education days for children, and we have all of these different, academic classes. But what we know and we understand, and especially since COVID, employers started understanding as well, is that if people are not coping well, if they are not psychologically at least a little, healthy, they don't perform, they don't function very well. And when you start to give that type of education from a very young age, primary school, high school, moving forward, let's just start there as a foundation to help it kind of get drilled into people's head that, hey, when you're struggling, these are things that you can do. Hey, these are things that we don't say that perpetuate stigma. This is how you help people in crisis. Because as much as we could say, well, let's educate people and let them know where to get help, how to get help. A lot of times when someone is in the throes of a mental health crisis, the insight isn't there or the hopefulness isn't there. And once that person has lost that sense of hopefulness, that's when things start to go downhill. They don't feel like there's anybody that could help them or anything that could help them at all, despite what we think, or what we know or what they themselves know. So it's kind of like that training has to start from young. And even then, that's not a guarantee, unfortunately.
And, that's why it's such an involved topic, Ms. McFarlane. And I don't pretend that we're going to find any solution this morning. But I wonder how do we tackle the present situation? I understand your point about, having this discussion more in the school environment, because I think we could all identify with having been in a school environment, certainly I have, at primary school, secondary school level, where you saw the damage that was being done to vulnerable students, being stigmatized, being ridiculed, and not even realizing when you're making fun of your classmate, the damage that you were doing, and that you were actually being encouraged in some cases, either by the teachers or by the society or by the wider environment. So clearly there is a concern as to the mental well-being, the mental health of our students in our present environment. But what would you say as far as the vulnerable people now? Because again, I take your point. Someone who is in the throes of deep depression, who maybe has just given birth, suffering from postpartum depression, that sort of situation. Someone who is maybe, whether it's schizophrenic or whatever episode. I mean, I have my occasional bouts of depression, and during that period, I can't think straight. So the question is, what do we do in situations
Yeah.
like that? I mean, it's impossible in any society to be able to be inside everybody's house every 5 minutes to be able to intervene. So how do we create an environment where people can reach out for support, reach out for assistance, not just financial assistance, but emotional support? What needs to be done in that regard?
What I can think of is more sort of outreach, more things on TV that give that education that, hey, this is what you do when, more availability. So I think even funding into mental health for both, public and private sector, so that there's so much that could be done in that, there could be more talks among the regions, in the different health centers or in the community centers. There could be workshops. I think also what has to happen is not just reaching out to the people who are suffering, as you said, because of the insight and so on, but also just getting that the society at large more educated, so that they know what these symptoms look like, so that they know when this is some stress we're going to help them with. They're going through a very brief period, but they'll be fine. And when this is an actual crisis, and this is what we do, this is where we take them. While no, we can't be in everybody's house every 5 minutes, there are some people who will need us to be in their homes every 5 minutes, metaphorically speaking, right? So we need more understanding of assessment, maybe more social works going out. From the time you have that baby in the hospital, we're doing that assessment, and when if you don't come for your checkup, someone checks on you. We have your emergency contacts, and as much as it could feel invasive and intrusive, it might save lives, So it needs to be structured and systematic, that we kind of really have a scoring system for when, this is baby blues, to when this is crisis, and the support needs to come from the entire society, as opposed to just the mental health team, because they are balancing, especially like in the hospitals, they are balancing a whole lot.
And I suppose, Mr. Fallon, we could probably spend a couple of minutes before we conclude as to the allocation of resources towards mental health and mental well-being in Trinidad and Tobago. But what would you say to people around? Because again, that whole thing about it takes a village to raise a child. Well, clearly it takes a village to abuse a child as well, because people tend to look the other way because they don't want to get involved. Some cases they do get involved, and we now trying to find out who called who or who didn't call who in this sad situation with little Hope, and she was strangled. But what would you say to someone who, because they don't want to get involved, because they can't, police come in and question me, children's authority come in and question me, asking me a set of questions, when all I was trying to do is help. Next thing you know, I have to go to court to testify on this, that, and the other about the prosecuting this person and so on. I'd rather not get involved. What would you say in that situation?
I think it's tough, because clearly that person has a lot of fear and anxiety about how the system is run, and they don't feel very confident that if they do try to help, they would not end up in trouble as well. And I suppose if that's a common complaint or concern, then there's something that needs to be looked at, in terms of how these things are handled by the law and so on. Also, what I would say is, they'd have to consider moving forward. What do you want to live with? Having gone to court and had a couple interviews over the course of a couple of weeks, or knowing that, I was in a position to save this baby's life, or this child's life, or this adult's life, and I just felt like I didn't feel safe enough to do that. I really question, why it is that the system is such a way that people are afraid to speak up about things like this, and that that has to be repaired, because we want to encourage people to help other people.
And on that, on the time that we have, and again, I fully appreciate that we're just not even scratching the surface with these very involved and serious issues. But in the few minutes that we have left, getting back to that environment, that beginning stage. For example, as I understand, I think it's just one social worker to 3 secondary schools, or something like that.
Wait, I've stopped hearing you.
Okay, are you hearing me now? 1, 2, 3. Are you hearing me now at this time? Mr. McFarlane, are you hearing me now?
Yeah, yes, I'm hearing you now.
Right.
Yes.
So let's finish up on the issue of social workers, for example, in the school environment. As I understand it, it's one social worker to 3 schools. I may be wrong, but let's say one social worker to 1 school. Is that enough? Is that, given the fact that it's quite clear that so many of our young people need some sort of counseling, need some sort of attention, need some sort of emotional support? Shouldn't we be channeling more of our scarce resources in that area, because that deals with the problem at the very root, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because you see, what would happen if the guidance officers or the social workers are overwhelmed is that they would have to triage, and they would have to choose to pay attention to the kids who have the most disruptive behaviors, and those that have equally as intense challenges that they need help with, but they're not acting out, so to speak, might not get the help that they need. And even those who are lower down in terms of intensity, but these things, as we know, do get exacerbated over time if unchecked, they also remain at risk. So therefore, I don't want to say we're spinning it up in mud, because every bit of help works, is good, but we would still have these issues popping up and not being completely resolved, because we're not putting enough into it. It comes back to that idea of really putting resources into mental health from the school level, come all the way up. And we have to realize that this is not something that we could sideline and say, well, let's focus on other things or more important things, because without mental health, there is no other health, there is no productivity, there is no good interpersonal relations, right? There's no proper coping socially on a social level, and that just leaves way to all sorts of problems popping up.
Indeed, and I just want to finish on this anecdote, which is not a pleasant one, Mr. Fallon. And when we talk about the school environment, I remember Standard 3 in my primary school. We all made fun of a young lady who clearly had developmental issues, but we didn't see it like, all the disparaging comments. And the teacher put her to the front of the class to continue to ridicule, and she urinated herself at the age of 9. And you look back on it and you think about how callous that whole environment was, and you wonder how that young lady fared later on in life after so many damaging experiences in what was considered a so-called good primary school. So your point is very relevant, and I don't, and to maybe try and answer your question, I don't know that we pay enough attention to that, because we don't see it as something that is an immediate concern, not realizing that we are failing at that level, which means we're going to fail for years and generations to come. But thank you very much anyway. Sorry to ramble on, but thank you very much indeed. Yes, you wanted to add something very quickly.
Touch on with that is that, you see, that comes back. You see how years later you remember that, and that's the same thing we were talking about with people not reporting things. And again, that kind of adds to the point that since the primary school level, we need to have this information out to children.
Ms. McFarlane, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to be with us this morning. Kelly McFarlane, clinical psychologist, with us at 6:35 in Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, we don't see it as something that is an immediate concern, but if you really think about all these problems that we have where they come from, it didn't happen yesterday. Anyway, as we go to the break, let's check out this wild orchid that's visited by some bees. It's taken by Karen Pilgrim in Belmont. Thank you very much for that as we head to a break.